Hey, what is up, the Locker Room? We are a division of National Youth Conference, and we are so excited that we have an opportunity to resource and equip student pastors so that they can make maximum impact in their community. And today we are doing our very first webinar. Now, we've done a lot of podcasts, we have blogs, we have a ton of resources for student pastors and leaders. So you need to get online, gbnyc.org, and click on the Locker Room so you can stay up to date with what we have going on with National Youth Conference, but as well, you can be better equipped so that you can make maximum impact. Now, today on the set for this episode of The Locker Room, Part 1, we are talking about that there are no virtual boundaries, and I'm joined today by an awesome guest, Natalie Chapman. She's actually a juvenile officer, and she's been one for 9 years. She has like 700 million degrees, specifically criminology, psychology, and sociology. I know that's a lot of stuff. It probably took you forever to get done with school, but you did, and so you are passionate about going and just talking to students and talking to leaders and parents about virtual boundaries.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
we're glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I just don't feel like anybody can be safe enough nowadays in our society with so many apps out there and devices and things like that. I just think everybody needs to be educated.
I definitely agree. I know that I'm not a student pastor anymore, but now I'm a different role on a staff at a church, and I have a student pastor that reports to me, and when they do that, sometimes you're always hoping for good news, but oftentimes, and not necessarily with him, but oftentimes with student pastors that are in our network, we are approached with questions that we don't always know the answer to, and that's okay because we're just a bunch of pastors. And sometimes we have to bring people in like you that can help us. And just to let you guys know, folks that are watching this webinar, Natalie is plugged into her church. She absolutely loves her church. She serves in the kids ministry. She has been in spoke at the student ministry in her local community. And so she not just is passionate about this topic and making sure people are informed, but she loves the local church. And so let's just dive right into this.
Sure.
We're obviously catering towards student pastors and leaders, but maybe just for a little bit, you can inform us on what does this look like for a student, virtual boundaries? What does that even mean?
Nowadays, there is like an unbelievable amount of apps that are out there that are available, that are free, that are easy to access, that can do pretty much whatever a youth wants it to do. Most of the common ones are Snapchat, Kik, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just to name some of the most popular ones. Something that I found very fascinating when I started looking into this is Facebook was a country, it would be the third largest country in the world. To me, that's unbelievable. And the youth nowadays, they don't realize that once they post something on there, whether it's a picture that they send to a friend, once they post something on Kik or Facebook, they no longer own that. It is out there for whoever to use at their discretion.
Wow. Yeah, to think of it being permanent when they think it's 5 seconds and gone or 10 seconds and gone or deleted and gone.
Absolutely. Nothing is deleted and gone. Snapchat, I personally don't use Snapchat, so I'm not real familiar with it, but it's my understanding that after so many seconds, that picture image is gone. Yes, it is gone off of your phone. However, there are people out there that are able to access those pictures, so they're never actually gone.
Yeah. And that's probably a scary reality for some students that when they hear that might be thinking, oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
It's out there forever.
Absolutely. And, once you send that picture, before you send that picture, I should say, you need to make sure that it's something that you would want everybody to see.
Right.
Whether it's your mom, whether it's your dad, a grandparent, a teacher, your siblings, anybody, that you wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, now what?
And that's definitely a good viewpoint to have in our culture now. It is seeming that we have to live in a mindset that what is done or said is just public. The privacy is starting to be gone. And kind of one of the things that our movement in the Locker Room really felt like this was an important topic for us to dive into is because we're constantly approached. And I know whenever I was a student pastor, I was constantly approached with just some folks that were students in particular dealing with sending these types of things, and even sometimes this was being leaked out to entire populations inside of the school.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's been some really, in our area, there have been some cases where there have been up to like 10 to 20 juveniles, kids involved
Wow.
with sharing pictures back and forth, different texts sent back and forth. And some of those had consequences tacked along with those because of the context in
Yeah, and so that's potentially very, very life altering. And actually, in part 2 of our webinar, we're going to dive into what the consequences of some of these actions are. And in part 1, we really want to dive into what awareness needs to be known for students and leaders, and then what specifically leaders can do about it. But be sure to check out part 2. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is sort of, we were talking about this, the fact it never goes away. That picture or sent out that somebody sends out, it's not their possession anymore.
Correct. Yeah. If I send you a picture, it's now yours, and you can take it and you can send it on to whoever and to your friends. You could post it on Facebook. You could post it wherever you so choose. It's no longer mine. And I don't think people, and especially the kids, I don't think they realize that.
Right.
They think that they own that, and they don't, and it can come back. I mean, everything can be traced nowadays. I mean, technology being what it is, it's unbelievable how things can be traced.
And it's traced back, and oftentimes I remember being the student pastor that was approached, sometimes by parents and sometimes by students and sometimes through the grapevine, about, hey, I just took inappropriate pictures and sent them, or my friend did, and either they're getting leaked or whatever. And oftentimes as a student pastor, they just don't know what to do. What's the role of a student pastor in finding out all this stuff?
Well, and I think what I would encourage everybody to do is meet with the family, meet with the kid and the parents or the grandparents, whoever they reside with, and see how it all started. Did they get it? Were they on the receiving end? Did they send it? Did they initiate it? Because all of that comes into play, which we will touch on that in part 2. And because there's different consequences that go
depending on which one you
were.
Yeah.
But I would encourage that, and to talk with the family, and then try to resolve it. And then if you can't resolve it, then obviously you would have to contact your local authorities or your local children's division and get other agencies involved.
Yeah, and I think that's crucial because a lot of times there's a fear of having a relationship with a student as wanting to be spiritual insight. I know one thing that students really love are boundaries, and they love knowing what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think it is very important that student pastors have a boldness to do what's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, there's a trust issue there as well. I mean, there's some kids that they don't come from a good background, home life, and they need somebody to trust. But there's that boundary again. As a youth pastor, student pastor, you've got to do the right thing. You've got to keep everybody safe. I mean, that's the underlying. Everybody's got to be safe.
Right. Yeah. And safety is the biggest deal. And when you're talking 10 and 20 students at a time, that's frightening.
It is frightening.
And have you ever seen any situations where maybe these students are just trying to collect as many as possible in their schools or anything like that? I
personally have not been involved in those, but I have heard of them. The ones that we have dealt with have been an exchange from just 1 to 2 or 3 people that I have personally been involved with. And it's usually, for instance, a young man asked a girl for some pictures. She sent them. He shared them with some of his friends, and it kind of stayed there. It stopped. However, there have been, in other areas, there have been multiple images, and I'm talking like 70 to 100, 200 images shared, and they ended up all over the school, on Facebook. I mean, it was unbelievable. Wow. And I mean, it's just crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy on a lot of levels. It's crazy that students are able to objectify people that they know personally, and that could be a topic as a student pastor that you'd want to address from a teaching standpoint with your students. And I know that oftentimes there are students that you're talking about that may be coming in from homes and families that are broken or maybe messed up, and that youth ministry may be the safe place for them. But what I think I hear you saying too is that in the long run, that not doing anything about it or not being vocal about it could be potentially damaging for a lot more than just that relationship with that one student.
Absolutely, absolutely. We will cover this in part 2, but as a student pastor, you are a mandated reporter in most states. And if you don't report something and it comes out, there's consequences for yourself.
So there's a huge liability there.
Yeah, liability. And so many students nowadays are innocent. They don't realize that what they could be doing is committing a crime.
Right.
And so I think if we educate them and we say, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong on so many levels, morally, but also you're committing a crime. Let's stop this now. This is your warning. I mean, obviously, depending on the degree and the nature of it. But let them educate them. And then if they do it again, then they know the consequences they're suffering. And they could be, life damaging.
Yeah. For a long period of time and having to deal with what the law is and the consequences of Absolutely. That. And for me, it's really important for student pastors to address these situations and awareness of what could happen. It's out there forever, all the stuff with the students, but sometimes the missing mark and being proactive instead of reactive and making sure that you're having the proper communication with the parents before anything would happen is important too.
Yes, and I think as a parent, you need to be actively involved in your child's life. I think you need to be looking at their phone. You need to have their passwords for Facebook. You need to be knowing what they're doing at all times. Now, because 70% of our youth are hiding something from their parents. And it may not be anything, they may not be committing a crime, but you need to be involved.
Yeah. 70% of students, teenagers out there are hiding something from their parents. That's a scary statistic, and it could be really easy to generalize and assume that much of what they're hiding is probably virtual in a world where there are no boundaries.
Absolutely. And there's so many predators out there nowadays that we want to think that they're the creepy old man that you could spot in a crowd, but that's not anymore. It's not. It's your neighbor. It's a teacher. It's anybody involved in the community. And there's chat rooms that kids are getting into, and they think they're talking to another youth. They think they're making a new friend. Like we used to have pen pals across this, country. Yeah. It's not that way anymore. You're usually talking to someone that is a predator, that is looking for their next victim.
Right. Yeah. And they're out there prowling, and I guarantee you that they have found the best way to communicate, and they can snoop in, and it is not right, but innocent students.
Yeah. Innocent students that are looking for a friend, that are looking for someone to talk to, and they groom them. They know exactly what to say, what to do, and before the youth knows it, they're in way over their head, and they don't know how to get out.
Yeah, and as you and I, and we've been in talks for months about doing this, but as you and I have kind of been in the discussions of this National Youth Conference, we're able to book somebody who's actually on the A&E TV show 8 Minutes, and she's a part of National Youth Conference for 2015, talking about her story of actually being trafficked through some of these means. And earlier you listed a whole lot of some of the ways that people do that. I know one in particular is really, really, really dangerous, and that's Kik. And Kik, I was told by a sheriff yesterday that it's actually headquartered in Canada, and so that's so different out there. But if you have any knowledge about Kik, it would be great for some folks out there who may not know the details of it.
Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Kik, but there was a case that was involved that was that they were using Kik. And once again, I'm going to stress to pass on to the youth, it can be traced. Anything that you use can be traced, but Kik is an app, is my understanding.
Yeah.
And it's that they get on there and they can chat, and just chat back and forth, and you have to have a password to log into it, and it's kind of a secret. It's free, and it's just a free app that the kids can use that talk back.
So it's a free app that kids download to essentially talk to each other.
Correct.
But in their minds, it's for some reason better than texting and better
Right.
than whatever else.
Because it's hidden. It can be hidden. They have to have a password where, like, when you text, your text app isn't protected.
Yep.
Okay, Kik is. And so they can set their password, and so they think it's protected. Nobody can get into it. Their parents can't see it.
Wow, that's crazy. And I heard of another app too that students are sometimes using to hide other apps
Correct.
on their phone. They can even hide like from my knowledge, pictures and videos and all of that
Right.
stuff.
Some of those aren't free, and then some of them are. I mean, kids nowadays are so savvy and so they are so much better than a lot of their parents and the older generations on there, that they can do so much with their phones and iPods and just iPads, anything. But you can't be too safe.
Yeah, that's a great line. It is never wrong to be too safe, especially when it comes into a world where there are no virtual boundaries. I think maybe today, as we're kind of just closing out of time, we have just a few more minutes. If you wouldn't mind, if you had to have a conversation right now with a student pastor that in their ministry they were dealing with a lot of students that were struggling with virtual boundaries, what would you say to a student pastor? Well, how could you encourage them, and what tools could you put in their hand that maybe could help, even if it's just knowledge is power?
Right, absolutely. I would think they need to reach out and get educated themselves. I mean, on the technology, find out what apps that their youth in their group are accessing, and educate yourself on that. And then if you come in contact with a youth that has sent inappropriate pictures or is receiving, sit down, talk to the youth, talk to the parents, get the right community resources involved, whether it's your local sheriff's department, police department, your juvenile office, or reach out and, make everybody aware of what's going on. But educate yourself. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, educate yourself. Yeah. That's so good. Knowledge is power, and it's good for our student pastors and leaders to go and chase after that. The locker room being a resource for the student pastors and leaders out there. We are going to be posting on our blog, gbnyc.org, and check it out because we're going to be putting on there the top 10 worst apps that a student can have, and what you need to do with that. If you don't have a teenager student, you need to get that list and distribute it to your parents. And Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on part 1 of this journey that we're on to help educate about virtual boundaries and the fact that there are no virtual boundaries.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Be sure to check out part 2. We're going to be really diving into the severity of the consequences whenever students cross virtual boundaries.